Holy Jesus. What is that? What the f is that? What is that private pile?
That right there is the foundation to all of the brush settings in clipstudiopaint. Or at least a good chunk of them. So I've been using clipstudiopaint for a long time, all the way back when it was called Manga Studio 5. And even now I wouldn't say I know all the ins and outs of the program because there's just so many features going on. But something I am familiar with are the brush settings. And in my opinion, the most overlooked setting to configure is the brush dynamics. So I've decided to go over this pop-up window right here as meticulously as possible in plain English so users both old and new can understand from top to bottom. And I know people are afraid of these graphs. The main tabs I'll be using is the Subtool and the Tool Property tab, which can be found in the Windows tab up top. I'll also be using this featureless, no-fuss, boneless brush to demonstrate everything, and if you'd like to follow along, here's how you can make it. And if you don't care, just jump to this timestamp here. It doesn't matter which tool you're on, but to make your life easier, it should be on one of the drawing brushes. In the subtool, hit the 3 bars on the upper left corner, go to Create Custom Subtool, and your input and output settings should be exactly like this. Everything else you can change. Once you hit OK, the Subtool Details window should pop up, but don't be afraid, we're not dealing with anything on the left right now, we're just focusing on the Brush Size tab. Hit that downward arrow and just uncheck the box. I also strongly suggest that you hit the Save All Settings default button at the bottom, just for reasons that'll come up later. But now that that's over, you now have your own boneless brush that you can follow along with. Now onto these dynamics. In the digital art landscape, pen pressure sensitivity is the most used brush setting ever. You will see it in any competent drawing software. In clipstudiopaint, you have 2 main components that determine your pressure sensitivity, the pen pressure slider and the pen pressure graph. As you can see, the slider, and most of the sliders, is labeled minimum value. And if you mess with it, the slider starts from 0 to 100, indicating percentage. With that, we can glean that the pressure slider determines the starting size of the brush when we add little to no pressure on the pen. Like for example, if I have a brush that's 100 points and the minimum value is at 50 or 50%, the starting size of your brush will be 50 points. In my experience though, this is only theoretical and doesn't follow exact math. Like with the same 100 point brush, if I place the slider at 25%, in theory, my starting size should be 25 points. But when I check to see if that's the same with the 25 point brush that has no pressure sensitivity, it doesn't add up. And I believe the reason for that is based on the individual's pressure control, or maybe the hardware pressure sensitivity settings, and not everyone wants to mess with that. Either way, that doesn't matter too much because the pressure graphs gives you way more control over how Clip interprets your pen pressure. You just have to learn how to read it. If you find graphs intimidating, or you're like me and you read them literally, when it comes to the pressure graph, the first thing you see is output lined up perfectly with the middle horizontal line, indicating that the line means something, which would also indicate that the vertical middle line is specifically labeled pen pressure. And none of that is true. These graphs are just really crowded and they suffer from very little space in this little window. If you just space everything out and turn the output label vertically like this, and that's how I learned how to read graphs, it immediately makes more sense. Left to right is pen pressure, and top to bottom determine the setting's behavior output, the setting being the size of the brush. However, you can also break this down into sections. Starting on the left, you have the lightest pressure used, and on the right side, you have the hardest pressure used. On the bottom is the smallest size your brush can be, and on the top, you have your largest size your brush can be. However way you look at it though, once you get familiar with how the graph works, you can start to piece together how you want your pressure sensitivity to behave beyond just the default diagonal line. Here are some pointers for starting your graph. You can place a node anywhere on the graph and the line will follow. While you can't delete the first 2 starting nodes, you can move them up and down to change the minimum and maximum size value without the slider. I should specify it's not always going to be the size. Again, it's going to be the output setting. So say if you're manipulating opacity, it's going to manipulate the opacity value and not the size. And if you want to delete a node, just hold it and swipe your stylus away from the graph. Here are some standard examples on how you can orient your graph and what the effect will have on your brush. Next up is tilt, and the graph specifically gave me a lot of issues reading it when I first started. Just like the pressure graph, I redesigned this one too, just so you can see the bigger picture. And the y-axis or the output stayed the same. It's still the settings behavior output. The x-axis, however, replaced the 0 and 100% with horizontal on the left and vertical on the right. And that just means your brush size now is based on the orientation of your stylus. So looking at the default graph line, you can see that if you hold your stylus horizontally, the size of your brush will increase. And if you hold it vertically, the size will decrease. And the reverse will be true if we invert the graph line. Vertical is now a small brush, and horizontal is now a large brush. As for the sliders, things are also a little different. The first slider is the same as the pressure slider, 0 to 100%. So the smallest your brush can be is still determined by this. Now, if the minimum value is the smallest your brush can be, the second slider, the maximum value, determines the largest your brush can be and increases the minimum value by up to 10 times. I have no idea why tilt is the only one that has a max slider, but it's a great and quick way to control and maintain multiple brush sizes without having to manually increase or decrease the size. It's also super beneficial for digital painting. I think all of my painting brushes that I've made have the tilt dynamic enabled, since it works so much better than pressure sensitivity. Velocity is simple. It utilizes the speed at which you draw. The smaller your minimum value is set, the smaller your brush strokes become, the faster you draw. And if you set it to 100, well, you might as well uncheck the box. It's actually one of my favorite dynamics, and I've used it to make brushes that kind of run out of ink, like an old ballpoint or gel pen. My only gripe with this is that I wish it had a graph of its own, or maybe an extra slider just like tilt. And random is also simple. Random is random.
Bruh.
Okay. It randomizes the brush size. The higher you increase the value percentage, the less random the brush becomes. So say you're intimidated by like textures and texture brushes and making your own textures, or don't even know how to import texture. This is like a quick and cheap way of making a textured brush. Now, since these last two dynamics are pretty straightforward, they really shine when they're paired up with the other dynamics. Brush dynamics are one in a bunch of other brush configurations in Clip Studio Paint. So why did I focus on just this part this entire video? Well, you can find dynamics not just here, but also here, and here, and here, and here, and here. You get the point. And I'm only on color jitter. That's the third setting tab. Basically, almost any box that looks like this is a dynamics configuration. So in reality, this accounts for at least 40% of Clip's brush settings, or whatever high number I can pull from thin air. And again, it's not just for newbies. This is a good guideline even for me to refer back to when I get lost, because I've made a lot of brushes and I've definitely gotten lost. With this video, hopefully you feel a little bit more confident exploring the other settings so you can make your own brushes. But if you're too scared or too busy or, lazy, the brushes I've mentioned... No judgment. The brushes I've mentioned throughout are conveniently available at my store, britashop.com, including some smaller packs if you don't want the giant one. This pack started off as 12 brushes, and then I got carried away with myself, and now it's 50 brushes. Like I mentioned before, a lot of my brushes utilize multiple dynamics. Some of the pen or the drawing brushes use velocity paired with pressure sensitivity, and the majority of the paint brushes have tilt functions, all from different settings besides just the brush size. And look, even if you don't buy them, at least you understand how to read the brush graphs. And before I officially end it, I'd like to make a quick brush from scratch just to review everything we went over. I might change some things quickly, and I might not even talk at certain points, but please feel free to follow along if you'd like. So it kind of goes without saying, but I am using the starter brush that I made in the beginning of the video. And if you didn't skip that little tutorial, then you can follow along too if you made this. And I also put down the little graph that I made, the demonstration, just for you guys can use as reference. I'm going to put this down to 30. That's just for the starting point. Let me take this off. And only going to be using the brush size dynamics. And I put on pen pressure first. And I don't want to use a lot of pressure, so I'm going to put this down. You can consider this little middle line kind of 50%. And if I put that down, I know that the largest brush size it can be is going to be gone by half. So I have 30 here, I have 30 here. So it's going to technically be like 15. If I take this, let me show you guys. Take this, see, it gets bigger, but with this, it becomes a lot smaller at the most pressure I can use. I'm also going to push the starting node just a little bit higher because I don't want to have too thin of a starting line. So that's what it looked like. Not only that, I know I want to make kind of a random, like toothy textured brush, and I can just do this. You can just put on the random dynamic, and that's fine, but I kind of want to push it even more. So I'm going to take this off for a minute. I'm going to put that on probably at the very last moment. Right now, I want to focus on the pen pressure because I can make texture just with the pen pressure. And I think you can put, not counting the first two, I think you can put 15 or 14 nodes on this. But let me just push this a little bit more. And it's pretty random. There's no like rhyme or reason to what I'm doing right now. I just want to see what the outcome would be. Delete this. That looks interesting, and I'm putting like little pressure. Let me see. I'm putting little pressure, putting a lot of pressure. Okay, it becomes more uniform. There's a lot of pressure. So let me push this down here and push this over. Let's see what that'll look like. Because sometimes when you're like drawing like this or drawing like that, your pressure isn't very uniform. Sometimes it gets higher, sometimes it gets lower. Push this up, push it down. I don't like that. Put it back down. Back down, put it back up. You know what? I'm just gonna use this one. I'll use this one. I think it looks nice. It looks interesting. You can probably just manipulate it some more. But going on to the tilt. I usually have my stylus oriented like 45 or 35 degree angle. Let me see. Yeah, it's more like 45 degree angle. So I definitely don't want the vertical to be as much as it is here. So I'm going to push, the horizontal. I'm going to push the vertical up here. So yeah, when I push down, this is what happens when I'm using something more horizontal. But I can still control it. I can still control it without having to, reorient my holding of the pencil. So here, I accidentally hit the mic. Here and down here. And you know what? I think I'm gonna let's see what happens if I push the vertical just a little bit up. It becomes really blobby. I'm gonna put it back down. I don't want the maximum value to be as high as 500. Again, since it's at 500 right here, and the minimum value is 100, meaning 100 being the 30 or whatever this endpoint is, it'll multiply the size of this by 500 when you go to a horizontal orientation. So I'm just gonna push this down a little bit more. I'll probably put it at like 300. Let's see. Yeah, that's not bad. It's like little blobs, like little beads. At least in the preview. Okay, next is velocity. Again, this is one of my favorite dynamics, especially when it comes to making drawing brushes. That looks nice, but I don't want it to run out that quickly. See how it runs out? I don't want it to run out. I want it to just get a little thin, so I'm gonna push it. Let's see what this will look like at 40. That's a little better. Let me push it just to see what it'll look like at 80. No, that's opacity. I'll put it to 60. This looks good. And now we go to random. By itself it looks nice, but let's see if I push it. Again, the higher the value at random, the less random it gets, so it's no longer random. But let's put it at 50%, so it's not as random as, the starting. Yeah, I like this. I like this. Maybe the tilt is unnecessary. I think the tilt might be unnecessary. But before I take it off, I actually want to use this as an inking brush. So let me go and ink. Let me just find some random sketch I have. Okay, so about 20 minutes later, here is the final result. If you notice, I did a lot of adjusting with these settings, especially the pressure sensitivity. It just because I didn't like how large some parts got and how small some other parts got. But other than that, I think I set out to make something that has some texture to it, and I think it looks nice. It's not exactly the greatest pen that I could have came up with, but something on the fly just as a demonstration. I think it's good enough. Again, here are the new settings that I came up with while I was drawing this, while I was inking. So if you want to copy it, here you go. Oh, and I almost forgot before I go, if you want to save this, here's how you should do it. Let me see. Take this here. Hold on. Give me a second. Okay, in Subtool, wherever your brush is, go to these three bars here. Go to Duplicate Subtool. Right here, call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. And back to the tool property with the little wrench, go down to save all settings as default. And there you go. And the reason why I said this, to do this, is so when you go back to the starter brush, the first one, you can reset all the settings to default, and then you can start again. And if you want to save it on your computer or whatever, go back to Subtool with the three bars and hit Export Subtool right here. Call it whatever again. And your file should pop up. There you have it. You've made a brush from the ground up just by messing with the dynamics on just one setting. This is my first ever tutorial / guide video, and since Clip really does have a lot of features, if you want me to go over more brush settings in the future, just let me know in the comments. Or, like, thumbs up the video. Did the like button light up? I hear it does that now. I haven't seen it though. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative, and until next time, bye. Vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. All right, I'm done.